G'day everyone, I am the man called Kemosabe, the man with the plan from the land down under, and this is my live review of KAMEN AMERICA issue 2 by Timothy Lim and Mark Pellegrini. Fantastic cover, both characters there looking very iconic, very colourful. I like this sort of painterly style you get with a lot of covers these days, not just the flat colours that it used to get back in the old days. The line work is sort of a purple colour as opposed to actually being a black line itself. I'm not a big fan of the 3D smudged flame effect. I think I would have preferred something a little bit more painted or drawn, but background looks 3D as well. I don't like that. I would have preferred to see that. I would have preferred to see that be drawn as well. This is volume 2, The Founding Fighters, a play on the term Founding Fathers, and a continuation of the first KAMEN AMERICA story. We've got a quote from Calvin Coolidge: "No person was ever honoured by what he received. Honour is a reward for what he gave." And that ties into one of the major themes of this particular story. Book starts with a flashback 4 years ago. Here you've got Zygmunt and Carly attending the dance together, but just as friends, as they reinforce the priest time and again. They're just there as friends. This is good writing because there's little interactions, little tidbits that show you who the characters are and what they're about. Vicky's worried about the geology final on Monday. Carly's like, have a good time. This is your last big fling before graduation. And Zygmunt makes a joke about she might have to repeat if she fails a geology exam. And Carly gets angry. She gets defensive of her friend Vicky because she's a good friend who defends her friends. But Zygmunt said, he's kidding because he knew that she has a scholarship. And Vicky's not really worried about it at all. Or she doing that thing that some people do where they're trying to shrug it off and say, look, I don't really mind. It doesn't bother me, rather than make a big deal about it. And this sort of ties into the overall theme of the story, because Carly says, who cares what any of the other students think anyway? So she is preaching, I don't care what other people think. But the whole theme of the book is literally her being concerned about how people perceive her and what they think of her. So, the lady doth protest too much. And here's Sylvia, who's been set up as kind of a foil. And even though Carly's demeanour says that she can't stand Sylvia, and she's gripping on the tablecloth and she's got the chilly icicles coming off her speech balloons, Sylvia's doesn't come across that rude at all. Like, she comes across maybe a little bit self-involved or a little bit airheaded. But Carly takes everything she says the wrong way, and it shows that Sylvia actually really knows the characters. She said, I didn't think you'd be here at the dance, Carly, because I thought you'd be so busy working hard in your studio because you're so industrious and you work hard on your dresses. Carly said, oh, what do you think I couldn't find a date? Carly's taking it the wrong way. She's looking for reasons to not like this Sylvia. And then she shows that she understands, she knows the characters well. She says, Zygmunt, it's great that you're going to go on to work in your father's gun shop. I know you'll be a good manager, and small businesses are important to the local economy. And even though she doesn't know Vicky's name, she still, she says greets her like they're best friends. So, but she's not mean or rude or cruel in any way, shape or form. And then Carly's like, 4 years of having put up with that, I can't stand her. And then they have a contest for who's got the best dress. And here's this panel that's been memed. Here's this panel that's been memed pretty hard already with the neck snap. That's become pretty popular on Twitter. Sylvia wins a prize, and Vicky explains it's because she ordered her dress from Paris. She says money beats merit every time, which seems unfortunately true. And there's a little bit of grounded reality. Her dad owns a bait shop, so it's not like she comes from rich family plantation money or something where she's getting her dresses ordered from Paris and she's this hoity-toity rich wybish that people can't stand. She's actually supports local community and local businesses and knows all the people well enough to ask about them and how their lives going. So I think Carly's taking this all very much the wrong way. And Zygmunt says getting angry and lashing out isn't going to make people like you more. If anything, it'll make them like you a whole lot less. And Carly says it wasn't about people liking her, it was about people appreciating her, and she feels like nobody notices her no matter how hard she tries. Cuts back to the present day, and she's in full costume fighting arthropod agent Dalton. I feel like I'm missing the joke there. Timothy Dalton played James Bond. I don't know what being a crab has to do with it. And Carly's worried that she's going to get shot, and then KAMEN Comet interferes, and they decide to do their fastball special type where they combining the power of electricity and fire to defeat this enemy. The whole way through this book, there's just these just funny little, just the dialogue, the back and forth between the two, the contrast of their characters. Carly's like happy-go-lucky, bit of bravado, whereas Meteor's Comet now. Comet's just much more down to earth and practical, and doesn't really go along with Carly's craziness. Carly says, this is why I insist we practice all of our moves, and Comet says, we literally just made it up right now. And in a scene that we've seen many, many times, particularly in Marvel comics, but it's pretty ubiquitous these days, the hero saves the day only to have people get mad at them and blame them. But, how dare you save me? It's like Incredibles all over again. I didn't ask you to save me. As opposed to being happy that this guy being happy that he wasn't killed by the crab Dalton, he's angry that there's mud on his car. And this is a callback to last issue where all the monsters were made of mud, the mud monsters. So someone's creating these creatures and setting them loose, and Vicky, Carly's friend, was studying mud samples and needed more mud samples to work out some sort of finding. Being a geologist, she is to try and work out what's different about the mud, why these creatures exist and where they're coming from. Carly's disappointed that nobody cares that they've defeated a monster, and Comet says they're probably just bored of it because they've been seeing it on and off non-stop for weeks. There's a little editor's note there telling us that the story of how Comet got to America is in Black Ops Volume 3, Apocalypse Now, which I have, but I haven't had a chance to read yet. Another funny little interaction here. Carly was showing her ignorance of Russia. Carly says America's better because they've got everything in their grocery stores. They have all sorts of food in there. And Comet says, so do the ones in Russia. Communism was a long time ago. Carly says, if communism was so long ago, why do your attacks have Soviet names? And Comet very cleverly recognises that her attacks have Soviet names because it makes them scarier. There's a news report that says how people are losing interest in these monster attacks, and then it says states that include Texas, Rhode Island, and even a few in Indiana. It gives us a few places where the monsters are showing up. I don't know if that's intentional. Like they didn't have to. If it's a sporadic and nationwide epidemic of monsters, you don't need to include a list of states. Knowing the way that Mark Pellegrini writes, I wouldn't be surprised if this is intentional and has actual story meaning to it. It might not, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. And then and it's a Rachel Maddow type host that we saw from in the last book. Pellegrini Lim aren't shy about lampooning the left. They're certainly much more polite about it, much more good-natured about it than the left are when they lampoon the right. And Nero Lansky, Carly's former agent, guest on the show, and he's putting forward the idea that people are losing interest in the attacks because a monster is only as interesting as the hero who slays it. And he says that nobody's interested in KAMEN America, KAMEN Comet, and that their costumes are poorly designed. Carly loses her temper and blows up the TV. Just noticing on the billboard here, it says, "Welcome to Oscar," and there's a turtle. The enemy at the end of the book is called Oscar. So are the monsters being created as a response to real-world stimulus? Is it a perversion of this thing? Like, who is this turtle Oscar, and why does that become Oscar later in the book? I always feel like with Pellegrini's books, there's a whole other layer of stuff going on. I'm never really aware of it. I'm aware that it's there, but I couldn't say for sure why it is there until much later on. There's a good job of lampshading stuff, but then not making it really obvious. There's Nasser Rabadi. Zelensky is going to a secret meeting. The door here's got mud around the outside, so whoever's creating these mud monsters is able to manipulate it like an animated object, and it creates a secret door for him to go in. Then we meet the Overlady of the Red Clay, Vermilion at Masquerade. And this is something that's really common in the KAMEN America books, is all the attacks are telegraphed and they've got names on it. All the characters have got little subtitles and bylines, which is something that you don't see so much in comics anymore. Flash used to be the Scarlet Speedster, Green Lantern used to be the Emerald Avenger. How long has it been since somebody called Batman the Caped Crusader or the Dark Knight Detective? Superman's always referred to as the Man of Steel, but I think that's more to do with the more recent Superman movie than anybody actually referring to him as the Man of Steel. I miss all those little sub-names, so it's cool to see that sort of thing in here. So these guys are in cahoots. And Lansky says the problem is that now that Carly left and went solo, became her own hero and wasn't working for his company anymore, they can't control who fights the creatures, so they don't get corporate sponsorship. There's a good point here. It says that consumers aren't told to like her, so they're losing interest. We need a new heroine. This idea that there's a contingent of people that just consume whatever they're told, whenever they're told. This is something that's become a much more common idea more recently with Star Wars movies, and that guy that's freaking out over the Star Wars trailer is literally in tears. And someone took the Boomer, Zoomer, Kuma meme and turned it into consumer. These people that just consume whatever you put in front of them. Vicky turns up to drop off test results for the monster mud, which Carly hasn't even looked at, which is something I don't really get about. You get these characters to get these powers and they're just super lackadaisy about it. They don't take it seriously. Like I said, I was watching Buffy with the missus, and she's trying to crawl through these sewer pipes and climb up walls and stuff, and she's wearing big gaudy platforms, and she's got a bouncy preppy haircut. Now, I know it's not necessarily what people want to see, but you think if you're gonna fight vampires for a living, same as if you're gonna is a zombie apocalypse. It's not about looking pretty, it's about surviving. So you shave your head. I'm surprised Buffy never got grabbed by the hair and slammed through a wall using like a pendulum, using a hair like the anchor of a pendulum, because it's big and it's out there. You'd really just cut it all off and just have like a buzz cut, like a number 2 all over or whatever, and just, it's not about being fashionable, it's about staying alive. Knowing where the monsters come from could be the difference between life and death in the next battle, but Carly's more interested in making her next costume or making a next dress for a fashion show than she is for working out where these monsters are coming from. And if these monsters are causing huge property damage and hurting people, in great power comes great responsibility. As a hero, I think she's been really lackadaisy in her duty as a hero to capitalise. I'd like to see a story where our character really does just go 100% all in for being a hero, and they just completely abandon all pretense of a secret identity. Buffy's trying to have a secret identity. Carly's trying to have a secret identity. She wants to be a superhero and a fashion icon. Like, if you get superpowers, just drop everything else and just focus on that. Just work at it 100%. I don't know why people have these powers and say I'm going to dedicate my life to helping people think that it's a good idea to try and have a regular life alongside of that. I've said before in other videos, I'm not a huge fan of all the little shout outs and all the little cameos that people have in books. I find they tend to age poorly, or they stand out and they don't really suit the tone of the story. Like, I've talked before about speed bumps in stories. If you're reading a story and there's a speed bump, you're reading a story and something takes you out of that story, takes you out of the narrative, takes you out of the flow, that's a speed bump. It slows you down. You should just be gliding along. You should just be hurtling down the highway of this story. Perfect smooth tarmac, just speeding down 100k an hour. You should just be going along with the narrative, enjoying it. You should be burning through the book. Every time something happens that pulls you out of that story, every time it slows you down, every time it makes you think, hey, I'm actually in a story, that's a speed bump. And you either have to slow the car you're reading right down and ease your way over the bump and then pick up speed again to get back into the story, or you hit the bump at full speed. And you know what happens when you hit a speed bump at full speed. It does damage the car. It can affect your enjoyment of the ride. So any speed bump has the potential to pull people out of the story and make them not enjoy the story as much. I think that's something that needs to be minimised. However, I've seen people on Twitter absolutely love this stuff, and they love little call-outs, particularly the people who it's aimed for, or the fans of the people that it's aimed for. So personal choice. If Lim and Pellegrini do a lot of this sort of thing, I don't see it going to be changing anytime soon. It's not something I would do. I think it looks a bit silly when you've got Cecil or someone in your book as a hidden background character, but a lot of people do it. Just because people do it doesn't make it right, doesn't make it good. But again, it's not for me. So this, I didn't get this one until I saw it on Twitter. Beans is PA, Pennsylvania. Apparently there's some girl on Twitter whose name is Beans from PA. I don't know her, but people seem to like the fact that she was in the book in this little cameo sort of form. These two panels here are a great little summary of what this particular issue is all about. Carly says, if I can't earn respect with superheroics, then I'll just have to earn it in the world of fashion. The hero thing is fun and all, but this is my true element. And then immediately after that, Misha says there's a monster rampaging downtown. Carly says, let's go, I'll drive. Misha says, why can't we just fly there? And Carly says, because I want to show off the new transformation sequences we've been practicing. So again, this is this thing where she's not being a very responsible hero. Is it possible that the car moves faster than she can fly? If so, she probably should drive. But as the crow flies, it's probably shorter. Most likely, most heroes fly faster than a car can drive with traffic. To minimise the loss of lives and to minimise property damage, she should be flying there to get there as quick as possible. But she'd rather drive, get there later, risk people's lives, because she wants to show off her transformation sequences, because she wants that recognition. She wants to earn respect in whatever she does. She wants to be seen. She wants to be acknowledged, like she's saying at the start of the book. This is the big theme of the book. I didn't feel that this theme was touched on especially heavily in the first book. It did feel a little bit like it just sort of come out of not nowhere, but they took something minor, the idea that she's disgruntled with the recognition that her fashion was getting, and turned it into the overarching theme of this whole book, to the point where, nearly half of all the talk in the book is to do with her and her being unhappy with the amount of recognition that she's getting. So it does feel like they took a minor idea and they blew it up really big. I don't know if that's what they always planned or if that's just where the story took them. Sometimes the story will take you in its own direction. It's up to you as the author if you want to let that happen and just ride that wave out, or if you want to fight against it and stick to your original plan. I find when that sort of inspiration strikes, it's worth at least following it for a little while to see where it goes. If it takes you too far off what you've planned, you might want to consider reining it back in. The best advice anybody ever seems to give when it comes to defeating writer's block is to make sure you have everything planned, so you're not trying to work out story beats and ideas, dialogue and description and the names of places as you're writing. You should have that stuff worked out ahead of time. Some pantsers don't need that. Some people just put in little placeholder names and come back to it later. I often do that. If you follow this new unplanned direction, it might take you to some amazing story beat you had never thought of, and some new concept or new character you hadn't planned for. But at the same time, you might also be chasing something that doesn't exist, and it pulls you away from your original plan, and it slows down your productivity. You got to think what you want out of it. Do you want to write your magnum opus? Do you want to write the best story possible, or do you want to write a 60,000 word book every month and continuously create quality product? You got to decide what your goals are when it comes to writing. How long do you want to spend writing on your script before you start getting art made for it? I really love the name Snarecrow. It's fantastic. So here's another. You see on the guy's shoulder here, there's a pickle. There's a Twitter bloke on Twitter, Dill Pickle or something. I think he wrote Vestry. Every time I see that, I think, they put that there on purpose. It kind of pulls me out of the story a little bit. So the girls do their new transformation sequences, Fateful Lightning and Red Glare. They're looking very buoyant in that image. And I like how they've got sort of not quite inverted colours, but a variation on colours. And they've got, I'm not sure what all the classifications are, what Sentai is, but I've seen some episodes of Sailor Moon when I was a kid. It used to be in between one cartoon and the next, so you'd watch, I can't remember, you'd watch some cartoon, then there'd be Sailor Moon on for half an hour, then there'd be another cartoon you actually wanted to watch, so you'd end up watching all the way through. And Sailor Moon ended up growing on me. I think Tuxedo Mask is just a really cool design, and the American intro for Sailor Moon was fantastic, a very catchy song. So they do their little Sentai, I think is the word, Sentai type intros. Came in America to prove the justice of our culture, I will vanquish you, and came in Comet, I'm going to murder you. So she just took the dials right up to 11 there. And it turns out this is actually a bit of a trap. Snarecrow is here, but Vermilion Masquerade has used this to lure the girls out. And she says that she makes art, and that's really all the motivation we get from her for this book. I don't remember if she's touched on in the first book. I'd have to go back and have a read of it. I don't remember her being in there. She might have been in there for a single panel or as like a shadowy figure. I think maybe there was some mention of somebody being in control of all the monsters, like a central figure, and that would be her. They continue fighting Snarecrow, but none of their powers seem to have too much effect on him. If the enemies are all made out of this mud, taking on this form, again, I feel like there's something bigger going on here. Why did she choose? Did Vermilion Masquerade come up with the pun Snarecrow, crow that has a snare, a trap of some sort? I mean, if he's made out of mud, then probably electricity is not going to hurt him too much at all, nor will fire really. But then he breathes fire back on her, so is he able to, send her power back at her, or absorb it and send it back? I don't know. Does he trap their power? Is that the snare part of Snarecrow, aside from the obvious snare that he holds? And even Carly points out that this character's theming doesn't fit at all. It doesn't make any sense for him to breathe fire if he's a scarecrow a crow that traps people, a Snarecrow. And to put out his flaming breath, a new hero arrives. Instant Hydro Heroine Kamen Ramen noodles. Kamen Ramen. He's calling Carly Senpai, which I believe is a sign of respect, like teacher or something, or elder. She gets stomped by the Snarecrow but survives. It goes really manga for a single panel here. There's the pickle dude again in the corner. And just as some bystanders are about to be blasted with a Snarecrow's fire breath, he gets decapitated by a girl in power armor, and it turns out to be Sylvia from the beginning of the book. She's the new heroine. She's being called Kamen UN, and she gives that line about borders are just a social construct because you can't see them. And to Pellegrini and Lim's credit, they don't make the people that they're lampooning out to be ridiculous, or they don't set them up to be ludicrous cartoon versions of themselves. They just have them say their actual talking points. They're people out there who believe that borders are social constructs and that you don't need them and that they're actually harmful. This dude in the back here with the money in the corner here, does that look like Micah to you? And this guy here, I think, with the beanie on with the consume shirt, so again, there's consumer mentality. I think that's Captain Alpha T-Dog, whatever his name is, that character that Nurkish created that does reviews on different media. It must be Micah, because he's got no sleeves, and Micah's whole thing is about not having sleeves. And he's saying her armor is so cool and that's all that matters. So is that like a little rib at Micah saying that he's all flash, no substance, that he just cares more about the visual, or he cares about the surface level, no substance? I don't know, and this is, I suppose, where the line starts to blur a bit. Are they having a go at Micah? Do they even know Micah? How much have they interacted? I don't know. Do I need to know the deepest lore? Do I need to know all that backstory? Like, what if you're a fan of Micah? Do you then take, creator differences probably shouldn't bleed into the work. It probably shouldn't make fans feel like they should have to choose one or the other. And something this light ribbing probably wouldn't, but it could lead to that sort of thing, or it could engender a culture where that sort of thing becomes more common. I guess I'm just leaning on the side of just tell a good story, and all that other stuff, just leave it. All that little guest spots and the ribbing and all that sort of stuff. I'd rather have an in-character guest spot. I'd rather see a character from another book. I would rather have seen Will Weldon's Punchline or somebody in the background as a bystander, or somebody who's just, Eric Larson does this really well in Savage Dragon. Whenever there's a big world-ending threat, aliens invading or something, he'll draw in the background just dozens and dozens of other image characters, some that dragons never met, some that it canonically wouldn't make any sense for them to exist in Dragon's world, but he manages to fit whole dozens and dozens of other characters in the background. It's always a joy to see them. Like every time there's an invasion, Shadowhawk's there helping. When's the last time you saw Shadowhawk in a comic, I'd prefer to see that than to see somebody having a rip at another creator or acknowledging somebody on Twitter that they're friendly with. But it's their comic. I suppose if they want to tip their hat to their friend, they can. And then to a cartoonish level, you've got these these guys here in the background. They've only got the construction lines drawn on their face. They don't even have features. They're literally NPCs. They're literally faceless, opinionless mobs that are made to consume and made to parrot whatever they're told to parrot. And the agent couldn't be any happier. He's having a smirk over there because these guys, to a cartoonish degree, are praising Kamen UN, and again, I've completely forgotten about Kamen America and Kamen Comet. When Carly proved that Lansky is being dodgy here and selling a dodgy product, he pulls out a video of her from college doing something really embarrassing. I don't think it was a big deal, but it's her singing the Sailor Moon theme song while trying to ride a mechanical bull. I mean, it doesn't seem like she's drunk or anything. I don't know. Considering the stuff that people put on TikTok and Twitter and YouTube these days, this seems pretty tame. I don't know why this would completely ruin her reputation, but it could be adding to this narrative that she's seen as ridiculous and she's overlooked in every respect. So like Rumble Terrier, that's a person on Twitter. That's somebody who has, I think he's interacted negatively with the Comics Great crowd. I couldn't say for sure. I don't follow a lot of that drama. And back up here, you've got Doug from Gravestone Press, and I don't know the name of the creator of Otis Stein, but Otis Stein's funding at the moment. So, do these guys need to be here? Do I need to stop and go, oh, that's right, Gravestone Press is a thing. They made Lone Wolf, which I reviewed, and they've got a Kickstarter going at the moment, so go back Lone Wolf if you want. This is clearly this guy here down in the second panel. This is EVS. This is Ethan Van Sciver with the head and the nose and and this is about the ribbit coin thing. He says the shades say they're made from real polyridex, and it is. I'm sure it is. And then Lansky saying it's 99.9% polyridex guaranteed. There's that whole scandal about the coins. Ethan was told that he was being given 99% pure silver coins or something, and it turned out that wasn't what they were at all. I believe he refunded everybody that asked for a refund. I don't know. Again, I try to avoid a lot of that drama. But now, what should be a really good book, and the first one was a really good book, what should be a sequel to a really good book? I just feel like every panel here you've got, did this need to be put in here about the whole sunglasses and the polyridex and that? Isn't that just a dig at EVS? Do these guys need to be specific creators in the background? I don't know. I mean, if he's doing it to help give him a little leg up and help give him a little bit of visibility, that's cool. I'm all for people doing as well as they can off a crowdfunder. And you can listen to me, a humble hero merchant. EVS often described himself as a humble pen and ink merchant. So is he called? Is NASA and is Tim Lim and is Pellegrini and Lim calling EVS a scammer? Because if you got a situation like this where something's not what it is, and EVS says, I was told it was this thing, it's not, here's your refund, and the other side said, no, you knew that it wasn't that thing and you ripped us off on purpose. There's no way to know on that. You're just going to believe whichever side you want to believe. I try to err on the side of caution. I try to err on the side of people are fairly decent most of the time. If he thinks that he was being given 99% silver, pure silver coins, I'm sure he believed that, and he was probably really disappointed and outraged when it turned out that he wasn't selling what he thought he was selling. But people on the other side of the whole Comicsgate thing, that a lot of people call anti-Comicsgate, which seems it's a bit like anti-fascist, isn't it? You're defining yourself by the political leanings of your enemy, as opposed to saying, hey, I am this thing. you're saying all I am is the opposition to these people. Seems a bit reductive. The antis were insisting that Ethan knew 100% of the time that he was ripping people off, and it was all part of a big scam, and that's just the way he operates, and he's a thief. And it just causes, it's like, forget all, like, I make comics. Buy the comics you want to buy, make the comics you want to see made. If you don't have the capacity to make comics, buy the ones you want to buy and ignore the ones you don't. I don't know why people have got to cause all this drama, all this outrage. It's the spite bucks, it's the outrage money, it's the drama money. I wish people just forget all this stuff and just make good comics. I don't know who these guys are here, but I'm sure they're somebody. I mean, they're there, they're talking, they've got a talking part. They've very specifically got particular logos and colours and looks. You know, I'm sure they're meant to be somebody in particular. Maybe some sort of YouTube celebrity or personality. I only just discovered the Critical Drinker the other day. This guy's got like 500,000 subs. Never heard of him. These two panels confuse me. Carly says, I don't know why you're here, but this is really petty of you, Sylvia. You haven't changed at all. And then Sylvia says, do I know you? But she says it with the ice dripping off it. Like, she said it really frostily. So does she actually know who Carly is? And she's pretending she doesn't. I mean, if she didn't know who she was, should you really have the frostiness? Shouldn't you just have a normal speech balloon? But again, it's Carly assuming the worst. I mean, they weren't doing very well against Snarecrow until Sylvia turned up. Like, potentially Sylvia saved their lives and the lives of those bystanders. Like, Snarecrow was about to fry those guys, and Sylvia saved their lives. There's no guarantee that the other Kamen girls are going to get there in time to save them. So, you know, it's like an ego recognition thing for her again. Hey, would she rather those people have died and she got the recognition for trying and failing, or would she rather them be saved and Sylvia gets the recognition? Spider-Man, you know, he never got the recognition he wanted. He never got positive recognition, but he never let it slow him down. I'm actually finding I'm liking Carly less in this book than I did in the first one. And, you know, and I hope it swings back around by the end and she's able to endear herself to me again. Kamen Ramen goes through her backstory. She got her powers the same way as Carly and Misha. She got hit with a meteor. So again, you got these bigger storylines, the idea that these girls are all getting their powers, and all over the world as well. I mean, you've got Japan, you've got Russia, you've got America. These places aren't necessarily that close to one another, all being hit by comets and all being given elemental superpowers. So, I mean, that's not an accident. That's something planned or something by design. Kimiko. Kimiko developed the power to control water. She became the spokesperson for her father's noodle company and was called Ramen Rider. But she didn't enjoy it. Her father said, follow your dreams. So she come to America to study under Carly because she believes that Carly has her life together and has her act together, which Misha thinks is very funny. And then this is an important little interaction here. Carly says, what do you hope to achieve by studying under me? What's your dream? What do you want to do with your life since you weren't happy being a spokesperson? And Kimiko says she wants to be a radiologist. Carly says, why would you want to do that? And Kimiko explains her motivation for being a radiologist, and Carly says, no, I mean, you're famous and popular and special. People in your country love and respect you. They notice you. Why would you trade that in to become something so obscure? And then Kimiko says the real clanger, there are more important things in life than getting attention. Carly's feeling a bit sorry for herself, saying, I'm sure lots of people can do what I do, which doesn't make any sense because not everybody can be a fashion designer, not everybody can be a superhero, like not everybody has powers. But she's feeling pretty down on herself. Siegfried adds to that, seeking affirmation is going to eat you alive until you learn how to be content with yourself, which is a lesson everybody needs to learn. If you're constantly trying to live up to the expectations of other people, you're never going to be happy with who you are because you're not being true to yourself, you're not being who you want to be or who you're meant to be. That's something I wish that high school kids would be told. I wish somebody just sit their high school kid down, first day of year 7, probably even earlier, that probably even in years 5 or 6 or whatever, and say, look, don't jump through hoops for other people. Don't try and be what they want you to be. Be yourself and stick with it. Because you've got to be who you've got to be, otherwise you're going to be miserable. That whole spiel. Doesn't seem to be enough of that. Too many young people just want to... Maybe this is what Pellegrini and Lim are alluding towards, this whole TikTok culture, this whole Facebook culture of updating your status, updating your wall constantly. Oh, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm eating. This is what's going through my head. Well, maybe not everybody wants to know what's going through your head. They're so desperate for attention and approval, they become something that they're really not, and they do that so long that they know they're not that thing, but they're no longer what they used to be. They're no longer themselves anymore. So now they're stuck in the middle. They're this unthing, this unperson. They're not the mask they put on, but no longer do they have a secret identity anymore. No longer are they the person they used to be before they started seeking this attention. They were never able to develop that person. They're stuck in this limbo as this sort of pointless, shapeless amoeba person. And how do you take a step forward from that? How do you begin to condense and solidify that and make your own personality and become a real person? Carly's up late listening to the news reports, and they're not very kind about her. They say that she's never acted like a good role model. She showed too much skin. She's a rip-off of KAMEN UN, which chronologically, of course, doesn't make any sense. I do feel like there's a side of the media that just full-on ignores facts and spins the narrative they want to spin for their own ends, and they ignore things that are plain as day. So some of the stuff here, those monsters had a run of the country before KAMEN UN come along. That's clearly not true. Carly and Mish has been fighting them for months. And they're saying that KAMEN America is a rip-off of KAMEN UN. Again, not true chronologically. And then stuff like, the monsters have been going on, monster attacks have been going on for a year and she hasn't managed to stop them from happening. That might actually be a valid point because she hasn't done anything to track down the mud and work out where it's coming from and who's responsible. She's more worried about getting attention. So she is really deficit in this one area. And then I think that's supposed to be John Oliver. I'm not up on the American late night blokes, but I think his name's John Oliver. And he's actually making sense here. He said the person responsible for the monsters showed up and Carly didn't do anything about it. And we know that she's had mud samples and results, pastoral results at least, for weeks now, and she hasn't done anything about that. So she's kind of been shamed into that, taking responsibility for actions here. It's probably good. Sometimes those heroes need those motivating moments. And it's just occurred to me now looking at this page that Vermilion Masquerade is controlling mud being dirt being earth. She's the earth elemental, she's the fourth elemental, so you've got earth, fire, wind. Oh no, you don't. Electricity. I suppose electricity is air, if you want to look at the elements like that, or they could be doing like JRPG elements where you have lightning attacks. Is there going to be a poison one? Probably not. But she might be the fourth elemental. Lietsky suggests that Vermilion Masquerade take Carly out of action, out of commission, and she takes it to mean murder her. And Vermilion Masquerade strangely says, I was clear at the start of our arrangement, I don't murder. And she said if she was going to kill someone, she'd start with Lansky. He tries to walk it back and say break her legs or do enough damage to her that she's not a problem anymore because she's constantly getting in the middle of their battles and taking the spotlight away from KAMEN UN. And then he drops a surprising fact that Vermilion Masquerade come to him, wanting to work with him. You would have thought it was the other way around. You would have thought he sought her out and said, hey, make me some monsters. She's turned up to him and said, hey, I can make these monsters. I don't know whose idea it was. I can make these monsters, so I'll make them and they'll attack, and you can put together superheroines that can defeat them, and we'll split the royalties, is what it looks like. So Carly goes to church, and up the top panel there, she's wearing the outfit she was working on earlier, which is a nice little bit of continuity. The priest says that he's noticed that she's been doing a lot of good lately, and she said, well, not many people notice. It's a pretty exclusive club you're in. And he said, the people who care about you have noticed. Is there a finer club than that? So it's a good point that if the people that care about you know the truth, and people that you care about know what's really going on, if people close to you know what's really going on, then you could maybe weather the lies and the slander from outside of that. She says that being trashed on TV constantly is wearing her down. This was some good writing. The priest mentions a teacher that she had when she was 10, Ms. Wormwood, and about how Carly said that she felt targeted by Ms. Wormwood and she wasn't allowed to be who she's supposed to be, free and creative and that sort of thing. And despite that, as a 10-year-old, she fought back against that and now has become a successful fashion designer, so she's able to overcome that oppression, I guess. And then she finds a letter in her jacket, and it's the last letter written by this old lady. Now, this old lady was the one that Carly gave her special scarf to back in the first book during wintertime when she was cold and she didn't have anything to warm her up, so she gave her like her special fabric scarf. And it turns out that old lady happened to be that same teacher that was really down on her when she was 10 years old. So the same person that said to her, you won't be anything special, you won't be unique, you shouldn't worry about trying to be a fashion designer, the person who crushed her dreams when she was young, has come right around and said, thanks for helping me, you essentially saved my life and you gave me some kindness when I had no kindness. And she says that she knew another Carly when she was a teacher and she wasn't nice to that Carly, and she wished that she could have been nicer to her and encouraged her instead of bringing her down, not knowing of course that Kamen Rider is the same Carly she's talking about. And it turns out this letter was sent from the coroner's office because Ms. Wormwood has passed, and Carly checks her phone, realises it's too late to make funerary arrangements, and Ms. Wormwood was cremated without ceremony, which is pretty sad. Then she knows she's got 31 texts and 8 messages. And this is a good bit of, how there's not any speech here. Like, you see she's got the messages and the texts and the calls. She listens to the phone. She runs out of church. She does the Clark Kent to Superman pose. You can see her hair's turning yellow as the electricity and the sparks are starting up as she activates her powers. You don't need her to be saying, oh, what's that? There's a monster attack. I'll be right there. It's much more powerful when it's silent. You don't always need to have text describing and telling us what's happening. You don't need to have a constant running narration from the character's head. On the way back from collecting mud samples, which Vicky needs to find out where the creatures are coming from and who's creating them, the two Kamens are attacked by this turtle monster, and even Sylvia turned up and she wasn't able to help at all either. So remember I said before there was a turtle and it was called Oscar. Now this is Oscar. I don't know if Vermilion Masquerade is getting inspiration from whatever she sees around her. She says, okay, turtle on the sign, I'll make a giant turtle monster. I don't know if there's something more to it than that. With Pellegrini writing, you can always it's a fairly safe bet that there's going to be a little bit more to than what meets the eye. He tends to put a little bit more into it than you'd imagine. I find this colouring really interesting on the giant turtle creature. It's very, very geometric, very flat and angular, which really suits the design. Clever design by whoever coloured this book to make him look angular all over, like the crystals coming out of his back. So the crystals light up and he's able to shoot energy beams. Misha's doing a last stand type thing, telling Kimiko to take Sylvia to safety, but then Carly turns up and you get that panel. That's fantastic. I mean, if you're not buying comics for that, I don't know what you are buying comics for. This is exactly what you want to see in a comic book. If Vermilion Masquerade is the fourth elemental, I'd be surprised if she doesn't end up joining them and making a foursome. The girls attack the creature. They use a bunch of combination moves. They work together. They show really great teamwork. And in doing so, they cause a chink in the armour. They cause a crack in the creature's exoskeleton. But the creature doesn't begin to dissolve like the rest of them have, the rest of the monsters. Seems to be a lot tougher than the other ones. I love this. Hailstorm Maelstrom. What a great name. That's good writing. That's clever. And the ice shards just bounce off its armour like it's not even hurt. Kamen Ramen looks like she's going to get chomped, and Sylvia steps in selflessly. So yeah, she might end up joining as well eventually. Just because she doesn't have powers, if her suit's powerful enough to make her a contender. She took out Snarecrow in a single hit. There's a sign here with some cherries on it. I think there's this sub-faction of, I don't know, anti-Comicsgate people that use cherries as like a symbol to identify each other. They call themselves cherries. I don't know what's going on with it, but it's everywhere. And I'm reading this book, and you got this really tense part. You got they reunite as a group. Probably shouldn't have scrolled up. They reunite as a group. Looks fantastic. You got the fluttering flag. You got Midtown, Middle America, Main Street. You got the green trees and the blue skies, and they're fighting as a team, and they're winning, and it's fantastic. And they're all together, and the monster makes a comeback, and it looks like it's about to chomp Kamen Ramen, and then Sylvia sacrifices herself to save her, and she tells her to run. Like, she, all the stuff she was saying before wasn't just lip service. She really believes that stuff, and even though some of her sentiments might be a bit naive, she really is there to help. She just wants to help people. I mean, she's a hero. Right now, this very second, she's a hero. And I'm thinking, gee, this is good writing. Gee, this has been set up well. It's so simple and straightforward. If Spider-Man or Batman could get back to this sort of thing, I'd be so much happier. I'd actually buy some of their books for the first time in a long time. And then I see this sign, and it's got cherries on it, and I'm reminded of cherries and War Campaign and Comicsgate and Anti-Comicsgate and all these sub-factions and all the whinging and the bitching and the infighting, and I just think, just leave that out and tell a good story, man. Just focus on the story. These little bits in the background are just detracting from my enjoyment of the whole thing. It looks like Sylvia gets eaten, and then huge electrical spark, and they surmise that the battery in her armour must have exploded and burnt out the giant turtle. And he's turned into what they're calling his second form. And this is probably my favourite move of the whole book. They combine Carly's electricity with Kimiko's water attack and form the Kamen Combo Utility Bill. Going straight for that chink in the armour. I mean, just fantastic energy. That swoop of her swooping up. All the speed lines focused in on that burning, smouldering chink in the armour, a close-up of her eyes as she's intent, she's focused, all the reflections. I mean, this is just really good storytelling, really good pacing, amazing artwork, great colouring. The combination of electricity and water causes the Oscar to start to break down and fall apart. They're covered in mud, and that's usually a sign that the creature's dying. And just at the last second before she passes out, Sylvia recognises Carly. And it seems like for a minute maybe that moment of recognition is enough for Carly. And then, of course, the camera crew turns up, ignores her, and focuses on Sylvia. There's a bit there where a bystander says, if she dies, we'll riot, which is very topical right now. Kimiko realises that nobody really does notice Carly, and Carly says it's fine, says she'd rather head home than deal with the press anyway. And then the news is only giving recognition to Sylvia for defeating the creature, saying that she did it single-handedly. Carly's got another mud sample for Vicky, and this one's still alive. And Zygmunt has to admit that Sylvia didn't mention any of the other Kamen core members at all. Carly, for once, says, Sylvia can have all the glory, I'm just happy to know that we did some good. She quotes that virtue is its own reward, which I believe the priest told her earlier in the book. And she says that if she's got people around her that love her, what more could she actually want? Like, what more affirmation could she want? And then finally, very rightfully, she acknowledges that they've got bigger problems than recognition. They need to find out who Vermilion Masquerade is and stop whatever she has planned. And that's the end of book 2. There's a little epilogue which sets up the next story, but I'll leave that to backers to read on their own. I'm going to leave some mystery after all. So it's a 60-page comic. If you get the digital version, it's like $7 or $8 or something for 60 pages. I mean, even US, even converted over to dollary dues, that's still a good deal. We're paying between $7 and $9 for your regular 22-page floppy anyway, so someone's going to charge me what's essentially $10 or $11 of my money to get a 60-page book of this quality. I'd do that every month. I wish somebody's putting out 10 of these a month, so I could go back to having. I mean, you couldn't do this every month. You couldn't do a 60-page book every month. But if they alternated them, if you had, I think Tim Lim's crew's done 4 books in a year, so you're doing them quarterly. So if you've got a half a dozen creators doing them quarterly, let's say he's putting one out in January. Somebody puts another one out in February, a third creator puts another one out in March, and then by April or May, it should be sort of like Lim's turn again. He comes around and puts his next book out. If you can get that sort of pace, if you can keep doing that sort of pace, I'd even be happy doing that sort of pace on if it was a 30-something or a 40-page book or a 48-page book. Like, it doesn't even have to be 60. If he could do 48 pages 4 times a year for $10 a pop, I'd be on that for life. As long as he wanted to do them, as long as he wanted to make them, I'd buy them. And then if you've got somebody doing the same thing, but they start their rotation in February, and if it's in a shared universe or a very loosely semi-shared universe, that's money. That's what people want. That's what the comic fans want. Because it doesn't exist anymore. DC is going full no continuity. Marvel essentially said, and I believe Bendis is the one who really brought this out, because he doesn't seem to respect continuity at all. They just said, look, continuity is completely subjective. You use the bits you want, you ignore the bits you don't. When you ignore continuity like that, when it only matters when it matters to the writer for that particular story, then none of it matters. If you don't have a standard that this exact thing did happen, then the character's a different character every time you tell the story. I mean, essentially every story is an Elseworld story. And you're doing that thing they do very often with Superman and Batman, I think, because they're probably the 2 most iconic characters. They pair them back to that most basic, fundamental idea. Orphan rocketed from a doomed planet. Boy watched his parents murdered in an alleyway. The pearls, the roses he lays in Crime Alley. The explosion of Krypton landing in a field in Smallville in Kansas. If that's the case, and if continuity doesn't matter, it's like you're retelling the same story over and over and over again. Like, you got to have continuity to say, yes, Spider-Man was cloned. There was a time when he thought that he was the clone and that the clone was the original, and yes, his parents reappeared after years of being missing, but it turns out they were robots created by Norman Osborn, or created by Harry Osborn to get revenge on Peter after his death, trying to get revenge on him for killing his father, Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, and then Norman Osborn come back to life. Continuity gets heavy and it gets convoluted and it becomes this mixed up spiderweb, but it's got to matter, because if it doesn't matter, then no fact about the character matters except for those super basic original concepts. Orphan rocketed from a doomed planet. Boy watching his parents get killed in Crime Alley. Continuity matters, and you shouldn't screw it up. And if you could create a loosely shared universe with a big overarching continuity, and you could be putting out books regularly, I think that's a workable model. I think it's a workable crowdfunded model, and it might even get to the point where instead of crowdfunding, you just have it up on your website and you just say, all right, here's this year's scheduled releases, and you either buy them as they come out, or you buy them you pre-buy them as a package beforehand. I mean, it relies on everybody getting their work done on time. But imagine if you could buy a 48-page book every month that's all linked to the same loose continuity, the same universe, with not necessarily overlapping storylines, but simultaneous storylines. I think that's what the comic industry is missing. Is this a Sashi pin-up? I'd say this is probably the Sashi pin-up. This looks like her style. I could be wrong, it's happened once or twice before. That's KAMEN AMERICA Volume 2. I think it's not as good as the first one. The character was less likeable. The main theme, the main push of the story didn't seem as relevant. I can see that it was building on something that did exist beforehand in the character in the first book, but I don't think that it was maybe as big a deal as they made it out. I mean, the whole book was about Carly needing to get past her need of recognition. I think that's something that you probably could have broken down and touched on over the first 3 books, and have her have this little epiphany, next book, somewhere in the middle somewhere, to bring it around for like the final closing of the 3rd act. I don't know necessarily if you need to have the whole 2nd book be about her getting past her need for recognition. But the art was great, the special moves were fun, and colouring's amazing as always. I don't feel like there's as much focus on other character development and the development of the relationships. There's clearly some romantic sort of stuff happening between Zygmunt and Carly. He seems maybe semi-unaware of it, and she doesn't want to acknowledge it. Right now it seems like they're just sort of friends, but I feel like maybe that could have grown a little bit more as well. Because Carly was such a centerpiece, this one, and her arc to get past her need for recognition was so central to this book, I feel like everybody else really fell by the wayside. And maybe it'll pick up next issue. Maybe they'll get a little bit more screen time. I mean, it is her book after all. And I remember reading Spider-Man issues back in the day, War of the Rose, Blood Rose. Some of the stuff's happening on Spectacular Spider-Man when Sal Buscema was drawing it. Yeah, like Nick Katzenberg there's this sleazy, dodgy reporter that was trying to steal Peter's stories and ended up getting lung cancer from smoking, and that was supposed to scare Mary Jane away from smoking because she'd been smoking a lot, and that was a real subplot for probably a year or so. As a kid, I didn't really care about that stuff. I just want to see Spider-Man doing cool things. I thought the whole Mary Jane smoking subplot was a bit of a waste of time. PSA, social commentary sort of stuff. I didn't want that in my comics. I just wanted Spider-Man doing cool stuff. So maybe Lim's aiming for that, just going, well, she's the main character. She's the one. We're going to focus on her doing cool, heroic stuff. I think the biggest bit of growing is her recognizing that she needs to step up more and be more active as a superhero, but that wasn't really solidified in this book. It wasn't really made concrete. It was sort of just touched on right at the end. She acknowledged, yeah, we got bigger problems, but she didn't sort of say, hey, I've been slacking in this department, I really need to step my game up because other people's lives and livelihoods are at risk. While I'm more worried about doing flashy transformations, I really should be getting on with being a superhero and being the best superhero I can be. Well worth the price. These guys have got a customer for life from me. I buy and read pretty much anything they put out because they've got a track record now. They've put out a dozen books. They're all high quality. They're all drawn well. They're all coloured well. They're all fun and well written. Pellegrini is a really good writer. They're paced well. They're wholesome and fun. Somebody on Twitter described them as cheesy, but I don't think that's cheesy. I think it's people are so cynical that they see anything that's not gritty and grim and anything that's even a little bit positive and I mean, look at the colours on. Look at that upbeat. Anything that's upbeat, they go, oh, that's just cheesy. That's apple pie and Americana and just amber waves of grain, and that's not cheesy. That's just wholesome. That's good, clean fun. There's not enough good, clean fun in comics anymore. It's so postmodern and so deconstructed. Everything's a drag now. They turned Wally West into a murderer. How do you ruin what's one of the greatest? Wally West's one of the best characters ever made. His transformation from Kid Flash to becoming the Flash and surpassing his mentor, surpassing Barry Allen's abilities and feats. Wally become a superior Flash to Barry, and I'm sure Barry would have been very proud of him. And as mentors and parents and fathers and teachers and adults, what we want for the young ones is for them to do better than us, to surpass us. And they take all that and they turn Wally into a murderer for reasons. With death metal and a dozen evil Batman and 3 Jokers, we need more books like what Tim Lim is putting out. This is what I want to spend my money on. I haven't bought a DC book in probably 10 years because there's nothing they've put out that grabs me, that really interests me. When they go non-continuity, nothing matters. So why would I bother collecting a full run? Why would I care about any one particular story if it doesn't add to the whole overall canvas, if it doesn't make it a big part of the bigger tapestry? Pellegrini and Lim are building their own tapestry here. They're building their own universe, and it's positive and it's upbeat, and the good guys win and the bad guys lose, and it looks fantastic and it's a lot of fun, and I get a lot more enjoyment out of this than I do any of the mainstream stuff I've read in the last couple of years. So keep up good work, boys, and I'll be back for the next issue.